Okay, we're talking about the Lucy Show. A couple more questions about it. First of all, do you have a favorite episode of the show? Favorite episode of the Lucy Show?
Favorite episode? I get confused with the Lucy Show. That's the one she was Martin. What's his first name? He was her boyfriend for
Dick.
a while. Dick Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a terrible pun that made a whole plot once. Vivian was complaining that her husband wasn't sending her her alimony and payments on time, and also converse. In addition to that, the plot was little Ricky kept his toys around the house, and Vivian kept tripping on them and so on. So. And once she got on a little roller skate or something and fell down and loose, oh my God. No, it's, I'm okay. So then the phone rings later in another scene, and it's, where's that alimony payment? And apparently the other end person said, I'm broke. And she says, broke my foot. And Lucy says, oh my God, she broke her foot. It started a whole plot.
It's a flimsy premise, but we got away with it.
Was there any flack for portraying a divorced woman on television at that time?
Yes, there was, and that's why we made Vivian the divorced woman and Lucy the widower. The widow. Yes, it was not considered proper.
Did you have to put up a fight or anything like that? Or?
No, we just made Vivian the divorcee.
You never saw her husband, her ex-husband, like you did later on with the Golden Girls and stuff and all those shows where you see the ex-husband.
We've come a long way.
Do you have a favorite episode of the Lucy Show?
I can't think of any one show that was outstanding. They were all pretty good. We got away with it. Which was the one, I'm thinking of the Lucy-Desi Comedy Hour, which was my favorite show. But they were all on a pretty different, even keel. I don't think anyone was outstanding. They were just good comedy.
Now, was Desi Arnaz involved in the show?
After he came back, yeah. He directed some of them.
And how influential was Lucy's new husband, Gary Morton, in the show?
Well, not much. He did the warm-up.
Oh, Gary.
Yeah. He did the warm-up, and he did it pretty well. He was a
He saw us
force-built comic.
He saw us out in the thing of the grass one day, sitting on a bench talking about something. Hey guys, come on in. We said, geez, he's running this place like a delicatessen.
But they were very good together. He was very wild about her, and she about him, and it worked out well. It was nice that she had some happiness with him.
What do you think is Lucy's legacy?
Women can be funny. I mean, there weren't a lot of great comedians who were...
Who was the great English lady who was funny?
Beatrice Lilly.
No, B was funny, but the beautiful one, the blue, thing.
Oh, yeah. She was married to Rex Harrison.
Jesus, she was funny. It was a beautiful English lady.
She
blew a bugle with one trumpet in one picture. Very funny. B. Lilly was funny too, but a different type thing. B. Lilly would do a whole thing, a very operatic thing, and her exit would be she's on roller skates, but she's got a long dress. You can't see that. She just skates off the thing.
Why did you leave the Lucy Show?
We'd been with her for, 11 years? 3 years? 2 years of I Love Lucy, 3 years of the Lucy-Desi Comedy Hours, 5, 6, 7 years. That was enough, and we got a big offer to be head writers on the Red Skelton show, which we did. We left. Also, without Desi, Lucy wasn't as much fun to work with. Let's
talk about your work with the Red Skelton show. How did that come about for you?
Well, I knew the producer, Seymour Burns, and he asked us to come over. They were losing their head writers, and we said we would. So we did. And it's a wonderful show for a writer who has absolutely no self-respect.
What do you mean by that?
The money was good, but he would rewrite everything. We would, it was an hour show, and it was broken down into monologue and sketch and pantomime.
He had 1 million joke books and old files and everything. He wasn't that creative, but he had a good memory and a lot of things. And he was a huge success in vaudeville and so and so prior to getting this show. And he had a big budget, a big show. And so every 4 years, he fired the head writers. That's how there was an opening on the show. And we lasted, what, 4 years?
3.
3 years.
Did he have a reputation among writers?
Yeah, it was considered crazy.
Did you know that going in?
Yeah, sure. But if you were going to wait for somebody sane to work for it.
Well, you figured you could handle him, you're nice, and he'll be nice to you. It's crazy.
The big joke was that Bob was very shy, and I did all the talking. When he'd come, he'd only come into town once a week to do the show. He was here one day, and I would be the spokesman. And the joke was he thought my name was Weiskopf and Schiller.
Can you describe Red Skelton, personally and professionally?
Well, professionally, he was a clown, and you can't communicate with a clown. I mean, they're, always on. He used to say in his warm-up, if I weren't so rich, they'd put me away, and he was right.
That's right.
If he weren't so...
If I wasn't making all this money, they'd put me away. That's true.
Okay, before we stop the tape, you were talking about Red Skelton, describing him.
He had an eccentricity, that proved his, perhaps his insanity. When he'd get into an argument with somebody and somebody did him, made him feel bad, they lived in Cathedral City, and he would go out in his backyard and bury that person. Not physically, but...
The definitive line that explained Red Skelton and his relationship with writers was as follows, if you can follow. When we got fired, they didn't know who to replace us with, so the producer, Bob's friend, and a nice guy, I liked him too, Seymour, said, geez, you're the only one. And we found a guy who we thought could replace us, and he was acceptable to the producer. And we said, come over to the show tonight when we did the run-through on a Monday night. The show used to last for an hour, maybe a little longer.
We'll show you how he ruins our script.
So, show you how he ruins the script. So, the thing goes along, and he's doing the script word for word as was written. And this guy looks at us like we're putting him on, and we don't know, and we're puzzled. And we found out later at the end of the show, he was mad at us for a letter we wrote to the editor or something. And Red said, I'll show those sons of bitches, I'll do the show just the way they wrote it. He's going to punish everyone. And the show was 11 minutes over with laughter.
We got buried again.
What about some of the characters that he performed? Talk about writing for some of those characters.
Clem Cadiddlehopper and...
I don't know who invented those characters.
Bad Week.
Red had them long before we were there.
Bad little boy, what was it called?
Yeah.
The mean little kid.
Mean little kid, yeah.
And he was a genius with this, they used to call it the silent spot. You remember Marcel Marceau? He would be a guest on the show when he was around, because he and Red, he was as good as Marceau in those kind of moves. He was wonderful.
We did a pantomime every week.
Now, did you write out the pantomime?
Yes, absolutely. Everything was
There were
written.
2 writers who did nothing but write the pantomime.
Who were the writers?
Dave O'Brien and who else?
He had the same name as another guy. We used to say the...
If we weren't so old, you'd be through with us by now.
Brian and Mort Green.
Mort Green.
There was another Mort Green.
Yes, there was. velvet.
That's right.
What was a typical work week like on the show? Did you have a lot of interaction with Red?
No, we separated into the sketch people, the monologue guy, and the pantomime people, or 2 pantomime people and 3 sketch people. Larry Ryan was one of them.
And then a guy who wrote jokes for his monologue, yeah.
Bob
Bob and
Orban.
I would go through the whole thing.
And we would just collate it and brush it up or rewrite or whatever. But we would all sit in on the original.
The show was #1 the week we got fired.
We were there for 3 years. Bob said working for Skelton is like going through junior high school. It's good for 3 years.
And where did you go after you were fired?
Lucy. I love Lucy.
After you left
Skelton.
Skelton, you went.
We went back to Lucy.
What? Oh, you're right.
Lucy to Skelton, and then
Yeah.
we went
Then what?
back to Lucy.
Did we?
Yeah,
Is that right?
pretty sure. Do you have any knowledge of what year that was?
Oh, we have that you went to the Phyllis Diller show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. That's what happened. We went to the beautiful Phyllis Diller show. And that was,
Very short shrift. From
yes.
out of that came Lorne Michaels, who does Saturday Night Live. He was one of the writers. He had a partner at the time.
Was that his first show?
Yes. First show in the United States.
What did you think of him as a writer?
What?
What did you think of him as a writer? Right off the bat.
Not much.
He's a better promoter and producer than he was a writer.
How about working with Phyllis Diller?
It was a failed show, really. I mean, she is not that strong. She can't handle a full show. Somewhere along the line, we worked for Flip Wilson.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Oh, thank you.
Also, you
Oh, Carol Burnett. We went on Carol
Also-
Burnett.
yeah.
That's interesting. We went on the Carol Burnett show, and there was a producer, nameless, who didn't like other people to write. He wanted all his own stuff on the show. And we kept writing sketches, and he kept putting them in the drawer and not using them. So when the Red Skelton, the Red Button, wait a minute,
Flip Wilson.
Flip Wilson show went on the air, or was about to go on the air, we sent these abandoned sketches over to the head writer, who bought them. I mean, he said, come join the staff. And we later won an Emmy for one of the sketches that we did that was rejected by this head writer on Carol Burnett.
Before we move on to the Flip Wilson show, describe working for Carol Burnett, for writing for her show.
I don't remember much about it. It was short-lived, and it was not a very good show.
Which?
Phyllis Diller.
Diller.
Carol Burnett.
Oh, Carol Burnett?
Oh.
Well, as I said, we were frustrated because we kept writing our little hearts out and writing what we thought was funny stuff, which turned out to be funny stuff on the
She
Flip
also
Wilson
had a
show.
couple of favorite writers, a boy and a girl. And they were good for her, I guess.
Did you work directly with her at all?
No.
Very little, hardly at all.
Are there any sketches that did get on the air that you wrote that
I have no recollection. They did get on the air later, as I said, on the Flip Wilson show.
Talk about that show. What was the format of the Flip Wilson show?
It was a variety
A
show,
variety.
and they did it in the round, so they had very little
Well,
scenery.
Flip had guest stars. Carol Burnett didn't have guest stars. She had her own company. I forget the names of the guys, They were good sketch comedians.
Harvey Korman, and
That's right. And the other guy did
The
the
little guy.
slow.
what's his name?
Tim Conway.
Tim
Tim
Conway.
Conway.
Let's talk about Flip Wilson. Can you describe him for
He
us?
was wonderful. He was wonderful. Very vague, though. I mean, not much interaction with the writers.
He was adulated, if that's the word, too much by the time we were there. Anything. Flip was like the genius. If he says boo, it's boo. Don't say anything. And he wasn't that brilliant because he'd He used to say he went to the edge of a cliff once and looked down, Grand Canyon, and looked down in the canyon, and he'd come back with this great material. And I kept saying he must have found Lou Holtz down in the bottom of the canyon because he's got all his own material, his old material. He'd steal people's material.
But there's a similarity in one respect between Flip Wilson and Red Buttons. They were both overnight sensations, and they both faded.
Do you have a theory about that?
Flip did this great character. He did the lady.
Geraldine.
We had a thing where he played a part of a bunny. Bing Crosby was a guest. Well, fun, very, very funny show.
My wife was the technical advisor.
Now, for a character like Geraldine, did Flip Wilson bring that character into the show?
Yes. He was doing it in nightclubs.
He had one great joke that sold me on him before he ever came to work. He used to do his own with Geraldine. She went in the airport to complain to somebody. She says, "You mean to tell me that they flew the airplane 5,000 miles? They found out the city, they found out the airport, they found out the runway, they found out the building. They can't find my luggage?"
Do you remember any of these sketches that you wrote for the show?
Oh, yeah, we
did a nice one with Flip and...
Tony Randall.
No, that one was funny, but the lady who became... what was her name?
Lily Tomlin.
Lily Tomlin. One of the early black-white things was very nice. Very nice sketch. It wasn't hilarious, but it was lovely. A lot of heart to it.
Dating service, and they were matched together in the dating service.
They didn't realize until they got together.
Very tender.
Yeah.
Funny.
Very nice.
Not hilarious, but it
lovely
was.
Scene.
But we did the thing with Tony Randall, who was playing the odd couple at the time, and they were inmates in a jail together. And Tony was the meticulous one, and Flip was his cellmate. And Tony takes soap and starts washing his hands, but it was a revolver that Flip had.
Flip has been spending months making a revolver
out of soap.
soap.
We got an Emmy for that sketch, that show.
How long were you on the show?
As long as it was on, I guess, 2 or 3 years.
A couple of years.
Who remembers these things?
And after that, is that when you went to Maude?
Yes. We went from there to Maude.
How did you become involved with Maude?
We both knew Norman earlier. Schiller knew him better than I did, although I knew him earlier. And, the contacts are in this business like they are in any job or anything. If people like it and they're friendly and they're in a position to offer you a job, there's a better chance of getting it.
Now, was Maude on the air when you joined?
Yes, so we came on about the 4th show.
Yeah, it was the first season, the 3 or 4 shows. They were having trouble with it.
Norman wasn't happy with the writers that they had, and he asked us if we'd like to come on, and we did.
One writer in particular who's no longer with us.
Yeah, don't mention his name.
Whose name?
Whoever it is.
How was the show described to you? How was the character of Maude described to you?
Well, I don't think anybody ever said Maude is so-and-so and so-and-so. But you watch it and you know what it is. You know what to write for. I mean, you never...
Maude was kind of a middle-class person, so reasonably affluent, that kind of fit our background, so it was comparatively easy things that came up. You'd have that included Norman. He used to come in and say, "I had a hell of an argument with Francis the other night. It's going to be wonderful in the Maude show,"
How involved was Norman Lear on the show?
Very. Norman was involved with every show that he had. A remarkable compartmentalization. He could go into one room and devote his entire attention to that show, and then...
If you were a writer, Norman was a lot of help, because he had good ideas and he was always upbeat. Writers have a tendency to sit down and say, "Geez, it ain't going to work." Norman, when you went in to see Norman for a meeting, you knew you were going to come out with a premise, because he was very upbeat, and he was right most of the time.
He and Desi were the best producers we worked for.
Were there similarities?
Very. They were both upbeat, and they were new story, and they worked like dogs. They didn't give up.
Did Norman Lear have a vision for the show?
Did Norman have a vision for the show? Sure. Sure. You know, when you look back on Maude was the first women's liber. And breaking new ground. That's because Norman was married to a woman who was very much involved in the movement, his first wife. And I think there's a lot of pillow talk there. And we are too. I mean, both of our wives are very much involved in, in the women's movement.
Can you describe the character of Maude?
Maude was a woman who had her feet in two generations. The generation where women were their husbands' ornaments, and the generation where women are taking over and have just as much right, equal rights, which is a dirty word, as men. And she also was very much trying to be with it. And so in trying to be with it, she would get it wrong quite often.
We wrote out the first script we did for Maude on our own. I mean, with Norman's assigned us. It was a whole half hour in one room. It scared the hell out of us, but it came off all right.
That was a psychiatrist?
No.
No, this was the convention. They went to a convention. She went along. And the break in the act was they went to the convention and they came back, and she's fuming. It was after the banquet dinner. It worked out very well.
She was fuming at him. She was angry at him because he said, "What's the problem, Maude?" She says, "The way you introduced me." She says, "What?" I said, "How did you introduce me, Walter?" He says, "And this is my wife." No, that's not what you said. What did I say? "Now I'd like to introduce you to the little woman." She says, "When I stood up, there was a 5-minute laugh." Well, that was, woman. I am woman, hear me now. That was good. It was a very intelligent show. We covered some wonderful ground, all of which had been plowed.
Yeah, they fought like crazy, but you always felt at the end they made you think they loved each other. It was a higher version, actually, of the Honeymooners. It's Gleason telling Alice, "One of these days, Alice, but at the end, you're the greatest."
Describe Walter's character.
Walter's character.
Oh. He was an intuitive actor, Bill. We always thought, yeah. I said, Jesus, that's the way you meant him to say it, with that right inflection and so and so. I don't know, he was pretty good.
He was a very good foil for Maude.
Yeah.
She would try to get away with things, and he wouldn't allow it. And, he's married to this strong woman, and he held his own, which is good. And he had a funny little face, and since we did a very serious thing with him, we made him an alcoholic. The first alcoholic show. 2-parter.
Yeah, it was kind of
Very dangerous
serious,
thing. Dangerous thing to do, to make your lead character an alcoholic. We were afraid that it would offend a lot of people, but apparently it didn't.
Did you feel you were straddling the line between comedy and drama?
Oh, sure. A good comedy has good drama. Otherwise, it's silly.
As writers, how were you able to balance that?
Well, that's the way the show went. It's the way you wrote it. That was the premise of the show. It was
A certain story you could tell would make, or was a dramatic story. That's a big. There's the famous word with comedy writers. I think it's a famous word called switch. You can take one out and switch it to a comedic idea if it's a good idea to start with. that wasn't yours, but it's perfectly permissible to do that. And that can happen with a joke or with a story, premise, a scene, so and so.
What about some of the other actors, characters on that show? There was Carol, her daughter, played by Adrienne Barbeau.
Yes. And Connie Bain and Rue McClanahan.
And Adrienne had a child, didn't she?
We never heard from the child. The first week we were on the show, as a joke, I wrote a premise and sent it in to Norman saying, Adrienne's child is kidnapped and nobody notices it for 6 episodes.
Rue McClanahan?
Rue was a delight to work for. She always got the laugh. And she was fun and bubbly.
Yeah, she was good.
Conrad Bain?
Wonderful. Total horse's ass. I mean, as an
The
actor.
character, yeah. But he's a good friend of ours, he and his wife. His wife's a painter, and so is mine.
His
We
wife
see each other every
did
week.
that.
And, yeah, that's from Connie's wife.
Esther Roll?
Esther did her job and did it well.
Esther died, I believe.
Yes, she did.
Now, why did she leave in 1974?
She had good times. They gave her a show.
And how did that change Maude?
We got another maid.
You got the English maid, Hermione Baddeley.
And lastly, we haven't talked about B. Arthur herself.
Brilliant performer. Wonderful. Couldn't do anything physical. Was total direct opposite of Lucy.
Who's that?
B. Arthur.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
She was a verbal comedian, and her inflections, she got squeezed every ounce of laugh out of every line. She was great.
Did she ever try to do physical comedy on the show?
Well, every now and then we'd give her something, and when we saw how bad it was, we just didn't do it anymore. So,
Who were some of the other writers on the show?
well, there was Bud Grossman and a man by the name of Alan Levitt, who worked on the stories.
Yeah.
Who else wrote?
I'm trying to think of Maude. And after we left, because the show continued, we didn't stay to it till finish. Didn't Artie Julian and Fox and not Fox, but
Davenport. Yeah. Artie Julian used to tell me that the worst show on television was Maude. We used to play golf together. And then he went on the show and he says, the best show on television is Maude. I said, how come it was the worst? He said, well, I wasn't on it.
Let's stop there to change the tape.